Welcome back to True Crime Mysteries. I'm Christopher Kern, investigative journalist, and before I tell you what Chris Watts is doing right now from behind prison walls, before I reveal the letters he's been writing that have shocked even seasoned investigators, before I show you evidence that honestly still keeps me up at night, I need you to understand something that terrifies me as someone who's covered hundreds of cases. This didn't happen in some dark, crime-ridden neighborhood. This happened in a place that probably looks exactly like where you're sitting right now, in a home that looked like yours, to a family that seemed perfect, to a woman who loved her husband, to two little girls who trusted their father, into an unborn baby boy who never got the chance to take his first breath. August 13th, 2018, Frederick, Colorado. A beautiful Monday morning. Shannon Watts came home from a business trip at 1:48 a.m., excited to see her daughters, carrying their unborn son, believing her husband loved her. By 1:30 p.m. that same day, she and her two little girls would be reported missing. By 5 p.m., Chris Watts would be on camera, lying to the entire world. And by the next morning, all three of them, plus their unborn baby, would be gone forever. But here's what haunts me. 8 years later, Chris Watts is still manipulating people. He's still finding victims. And what I've uncovered about his current activities in prison, it reveals something absolutely chilling about the kind of predator he really is. Before we go any further, I want us to take just a moment, because Shannon Watts was a real person. Bella and Celeste were real children. Baby Nico never got to live, and their lives mattered infinitely more than this story.
So let's honor them. Shannon was a devoted mother, a successful businesswoman, a loyal friend, and a woman who fought for her family until her very last moment. Bella was 4 years old, bright, sensitive, and loving. Celeste was 3, joyful, funny, and full of life. And baby Nico would have been 5 years old today. God rest their precious souls. If you're watching this, please type Amen in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Let's fill this comment section with love for this beautiful family. Now, stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through over the next 30 minutes will change how you see this case. And more importantly, it might just save someone's life, because the warning signs were there. They were always there. We just didn't know how to see them yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, but I promise you, this story doesn't end where you think it does. If you scrolled through Shannon Watts' Facebook page in the summer of 2018, you would have seen what millions of people saw, the perfect American family. Shannon wasn't just posting random photos, she was documenting everything. The girls' breakfast routines, date nights with Chris, her struggles with lupus, her fertility journey, her business success selling health products. She was real, raw, relatable. And here's what made her different from so many people on social media. She wasn't trying to create some fake, perfect life. She shared her struggles, her financial stress, her health challenges. When she posted, "I love my husband," you could feel that she meant it. She was fighting for her marriage, fighting for her family. But here's something I noticed when I went through her posts from those final weeks, something that made my blood run cold.
In the 6 weeks before she died, Shannon was posting more about Chris, more couple photos, more love declarations, more public displays of affection. Now, does that mean she did anything wrong? Absolutely not, but it tells us something crucial. She knew something was off. Maybe she couldn't put her finger on it. Maybe she didn't want to believe it. But deep down, Shannon knew her marriage was in trouble, and she was fighting for it the only way she knew how. Let me give you the timeline, because timing is everything in this case, and when you see how fast this escalated, it'll make your stomach turn. June 2018, Shannon discovers she's pregnant with their 3rd child, a boy they would name Nico. She's thrilled. She makes this beautiful announcement, but according to her close friends, Chris seemed distant, cold, like he wasn't really there. July 2018, just 1 month before the murders, Chris starts an affair with a coworker named Nikki Kessinger. But this wasn't some long-term thing that developed over time. This was rapid, intense, all-consuming. And here's where it gets dark. While Shanann and the girls were in North Carolina visiting family for 6 weeks, Chris brought Nikki into his home, into the bed he shared with his wife. They went to a concert together, they acted like a couple, and the whole time he's texting Shanann saying he misses her and the girls. August 10th, 3 days before the murders, Shanann confronts Chris about his emotional distance. They have what her friends described as a make-it-or-break-it conversation about their marriage. August 11th, 2 days before, Chris Googles how to get away with, and I'll let you fill in the rest. He'll later claim it was about getting away with a broken relationship, but forensic experts tell a very different story. August 13th, 1:48 a.m., Shanann's Uber drops her off at home. A neighbor's doorbell camera captures this moment. She's walking up to her house, tired from her trip, probably thinking about crawling into bed, checking on her sleeping daughters. She has no idea she has less than 2 hours to live. Now here's where this story takes a turn that saved the case, because in most missing person situations, there's a waiting period. Reports sit for 24 to 48 hours. Maybe she just needed space, maybe she'll come back, but not this time. And the reason why is a woman named Nicolette Atkinson. Remember that name, because she's the hero of this story. Nicole wasn't just Shanann's friend, she was her business partner, her confidant, and on August 13th, 2018, she became the person who refused to wait. At 1:30 p.m., when Shanann missed her OBGYN appointment, an appointment she'd been excited about, an appointment to check on baby Nico, Nicole knew something was catastrophically wrong. She called, no answer. She texted, nothing. She called Chris. He seemed confused about where Shanann might be. That word, confused, not worried, not panicked, confused. Nicole called Shanann's other friends. No one had heard from her. So by 2 p.m., Nicole drove to the Watts home. And here's the detail that changes everything. Shanann had given Nicole her garage code. Think about that level of trust. When Nicole walked into that house, she immediately knew. Shanann's phone was sitting there, her medication, her suitcase still packed from her trip, her shoes by the stairs, the girls' medicine on the counter. Everything was there except Shanann and the girls. For a mother of 2 young children who was 15 weeks pregnant with a high-risk pregnancy, for someone who documented every moment of her life, for someone who had a doctor's appointment she was looking forward to, this wasn't running errands, this wasn't going for a walk, this was wrong. Very, very wrong. At 2:15 p.m., Nicole called the Frederick Police Department. And here's why Nicole is a hero. She didn't just report Shanann missing, she specifically told them to watch Chris closely. She told them Shanann would never leave without her phone. She told them something was very wrong. That instinct, that refusal to wait, that's what broke this case wide open. Officer Scott Baumhover responded, and later he would testify that the moment Chris Watts arrived home and he saw his behavior, he knew something was off. Chris pulled up to his house around 2:30 p.m. Officer Baumhover and Nicole were waiting for him. And I want you to really hear this next part, because within the first 30 seconds of that interaction, Chris Watts told his first documented lie. The officer asked, "When did you last see your wife?" Chris answered, "This morning, around 5:15, before I left for work." "How did she seem?" "Normal, fine. We had a normal morning." Normal. That word keeps coming up. Chris is trying so hard to paint a picture of a routine Monday morning, nothing unusual, everything normal. But Officer Baumhover noticed something that every investigator is trained to spot. Chris wasn't asking the right questions. He wasn't saying, "Where could she be? Should we check hospitals? Let me call her friends." He was calm. Too calm. He was explaining, justifying, already building an alibi. Nicole would later describe his behavior as weird and cold. She said he showed no emotion, no panic, no fear, just explanations, like he was reading from a script he'd prepared. By 3 p.m., officers were canvassing the neighborhood, checking security cameras, knocking on doors, and that's when they knocked on Nate Trinistitch's door. Nate was the neighbor directly across the street, and he had a security camera that faced the Watts driveway. Nate mentioned the camera.
Officers called for Detective Dave Baumhover to come review the footage. And here's where Chris makes his first massive mistake. He volunteers to come watch the footage with them. He thinks he's being helpful. He thinks he's playing the concerned husband. What he doesn't realize is that he's about to narrate his own crime. They're all standing in Nate's living room, gathered around a computer screen. The timestamp reads 5 a.m., August 13th. They start watching. At 5:17 a.m., Chris's truck backs out of the garage into the driveway. Chris says, "Yeah, that's me leaving for work." But then the truck pulls back into the garage. The door closes. Chris explains, "I forgot something, my lunch. Had to run back in." The truck sits there with the garage door closed for about 10 minutes. Then, at 5:27 a.m., it leaves again. Chris calmly explains he got his lunch and headed to work. But here's what Chris doesn't know in this moment. Here's what he can't possibly know. While that truck was sitting in that garage, while he was supposedly getting his lunch, he was actually loading his wife's body and his 2 daughters into his truck. Shanann was already gone. The girls were still alive at that point, but they wouldn't be for much longer. And he's standing there, watching this footage, narrating it like it's nothing. Detective Baumhover later said, "I've interviewed hundreds of people in missing persons cases. Worried husbands don't act like that. They're frantic."
They're demanding we do more. They're calling everyone they know. Chris was calm, like he was solving a puzzle he already knew the answer to. By 5 p.m. that evening, the local news had picked up the story. Missing pregnant mother, 2 young daughters. It's the kind of story that captures attention. And Chris Watts agreed to do an interview with a reporter from Denver 7, right there on his front porch, less than 16 hours after he murdered his entire family. This interview, this moment right here, becomes one of the most analyzed pieces of footage in true crime history. The reporter asks, "What's your message to them?" And Chris says, "Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like if somebody has her, just bring her back. I need to see everybody. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring them back." Now, I need you to really listen to how he said that. If you're out there. That's what we call distancing language. He doesn't believe they're out there. He knows they're not. If somebody has her, he's creating a kidnapper narrative, an outside villain. I need to see everybody. Not them, not my family, everybody. It's depersonalized. This house is not complete, not my life is destroyed, not I'm falling apart. The house isn't complete. But it's his body language that really gives him away. Watch his hand. He touches his wedding ring, not in a loving, longing way, but like he's checking if it's still there, making sure he looks the part. His eyes aren't red from crying, they're focused on the camera. He takes this deep breath before speaking, like an actor preparing for a scene. Compare this to interviews with genuinely worried spouses whose families are actually missing. It's completely different. Real grief is raw, it's barely coherent, it's overwhelming. Chris Watts is performing. By 11 p.m. that night, Chris is asked to come to the police station for further questioning. He agrees, because in his mind, he's still in control. He's still managing the story. He has no idea that while he's been performing for cameras, investigators have been working behind the scenes. They've pulled his phone records, they've talked to his coworkers, they've analyzed that security footage frame by frame. They've been searching databases, and they found something Chris didn't think they'd discover so quickly. They found Nikki Kessinger, the girlfriend he forgot to mention. Around 1 a.m. on August 14th, detectives suggest Chris take a polygraph test. And Chris, still believing he can control this, agrees. The test takes about 90 minutes. 3 main questions. Did you cause your wife's disappearance? Do you know where your wife is? Do you know where your daughters are? Chris answers no to all 3. The examiner runs the test, runs it again, then sits back and tells Chris, "You failed, significantly, on all 3 questions." And here's what's telling. Chris doesn't react with confusion or anger like an innocent person would. He doesn't demand to take it again. He just deflates, like the air has been let out of him.
The examiner tells him, "Chris, you're not a good liar. Your body is telling us what your words won't. You know what happened to your family." At 3 a.m., Chris asks to speak to his father. Ronnie Watts drives to the station. They talk alone for about 20 minutes. What happens in that room will be disputed later, but when detectives return, Chris is ready to talk. "I need to tell you something," he says, "but you're going to think I'm a monster." And then Chris Watts tells his first version of the truth, the one he thinks will be enough, the one he thinks will save him. He claims he saw Shanann on the Gaby monitor, strangling Celeste, that Bella was already gone, that he freaked out and strangled Shanann in a rage, that it was a crime of passion, an emotional reaction to seeing his wife hurt their children. This confession, this story he tells at 3 a.m., is almost entirely a lie, and investigators will spend months proving it. But in that moment, they have what they need. Chris Watts is no longer claiming his family is missing. He's admitting they're gone, and he's admitting he put them there. By 4 a.m., search teams are heading to the Survey 319 oil field, a worksite Chris had access to. By sunrise, they find Shanann's body buried in a shallow grave. She's wearing the same shirt she had on when she came home from her trip. And by mid-morning, they find something that will haunt everyone involved in this case for the rest of their lives. They find Bella and Celeste submerged in oil tanks, separate tanks. Those little girls, 4 years old and 3 years old, spent their final moments in complete darkness, knowing their father had put them there. The autopsy results would later reveal the truth that destroys Chris's story completely. Shanann died from manual strangulation. It took several minutes. It wasn't a quick crime of passion. It was prolonged, intentional. The girls, they died from smothering and crude oil aspiration. But here's the part that breaks my heart. Bella's stomach contents showed she'd been crying so hard before she died that she'd thrown up. She knew what was happening. That baby fought. She witnessed what happened to her sister, and she knew her daddy was the one doing it. Chris's story about Shanann killing the girls? Physically impossible. The timeline didn't match. The evidence didn't support it. It was one final attempt to play the victim, to make himself look like he'd reacted to something tragic rather than caused it. Months later, Chris would give another confession from prison, the real one, or at least closer to the truth. He'd admit that he strangled Shanann in their bed while she slept, that he loaded her body in his truck, that Bella and Celeste woke up, that they asked where Mommy was, that he drove them to the oil field with their mother's body in the truck, that he smothered them there, that Bella said "Daddy, no" before she died. I'm a journalist. I've covered wars. I've covered natural disasters. I've covered heinous crimes. But this case, this one breaks something in you, because those little girls trusted him, they loved him, and he looked into their eyes and he took their lives anyway. Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences plus 48 years for unlawful termination of a pregnancy. No possibility of parole. He'll die in prison. And that brings us to today, 8 years later, because this story, unfortunately, doesn't end with his arrest. Chris Watts is currently housed at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, and here's what's disturbing. He's been receiving letters, lots of letters, from women who claim to love him, women who want to be with him, women who believe his lies, or worse, don't even care about the truth.
There are reports, unconfirmed but persistent, that Chris has developed a romantic relationship with someone through correspondence, that he's telling her he's misunderstood, that he's changed, that he's found God. The same manipulation tactics he used on Nikki Kessinger, the same lies, the same performance. And this is why this case still matters today, because Chris Watts represents something terrifying. He's a family annihilator. That's the clinical term. Men who decide their families are obstacles to the life they want, so they eliminate them. And the statistics are horrifying. This happens more often than you think. The warning signs were there. The emotional distance, the affair, the financial stress, the controlling behavior masked as being nice.
the way he isolated Shanann from making decisions, the way he made her feel like she was the problem. These are patterns, and if we learn to recognize them, we can save lives. So let me ask you this, and I really want you to answer in the comments. What do you think is the most important warning sign people should watch for in relationships? What red flag do you think gets missed most often? Drop your thoughts below, because these conversations matter. They save lives. And if you're getting value from this deep investigative work, if you appreciate that we're covering this case with respect for the victims while still exposing the truth, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications, because I've got more cases like this coming. Cases where justice needs a spotlight, where truth needs to be told. I'm Christopher Kern, investigative journalist, and I don't just report on crime, I dig into it. I find the details others miss. I talk to the experts, I review the evidence, and I bring you the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Look, here's the reality. Shanann Watts fought for her family until her very last breath. Bella and Celeste deserved to grow up, to go to school, to fall in love, to live. Baby Nico deserved to be born. They deserved so much more than what Chris Watts gave them. But their story doesn't have to be in vain. We can honor them by learning from this tragedy, by recognizing these patterns, by believing people when they tell us something feels wrong, by refusing to ignore the signs because someone seems nice, or because a family looks perfect on social media. Real talk, if something in your gut tells you a relationship isn't right, trust that instinct.
If someone you love is showing signs of being controlled or isolated or afraid, speak up. Don't wait. Nicolette Atkinson didn't wait, and that's why Chris Watts is in prison instead of potentially still free. Before we wrap up, I want to say one more thing. This case broke the hearts of millions of people around the world. And if you're feeling heavy after hearing this, that's normal. That means you're human. That means you care. And that care, that empathy, that's what makes us different from people like Chris Watts. So I'm going to ask you to do something for me. In the comments, share one memory, one thought, one prayer for Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. Let's fill this space with love. Let's make sure they're remembered not just as victims of a crime, but as real people who mattered, who still matter. Share this video if you think it's important, not for views, not for algorithm, but because someone watching might see themselves in this story. Someone might recognize a warning sign. Someone might leave a dangerous situation because they saw the truth in time. That's why this work matters. I'm Christopher Kern, and this is True Crime Mysteries, where we don't just tell stories, we seek truth. I'll see you in the next investigation. Stay safe out there. Trust your instincts, and never forget that being aware might just save a life. And to Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico, you are not forgotten. You are loved, and your story will continue to protect others. Rest in peace, beautiful souls.